And welcome to the Life Burst Podcast. We're going to be talking about the new decks, the updates, the best of the rest, as the series is called. As said before, with the last tier list, you can watch that and see how things have changed in tiers. I'm only covering B tier and above now. I will go over a few C tier stuff, just because I might think it's interesting. For example, Cosmos Aggro or Miko Atomic Shell. They're new and they're interesting, so I might go over them. But I'm not generally going to be going over all this stuff here. If you want to see what deck lists are good for these types of centers, you might just copy some main deck of something else. I have some other ones that are on here, but they're generally speaking more like outdated or something I just don't think is necessary to cover. Anyways, like I said, if you guys want to see try to have something that's like Paraluke, which is a discard midrange. It's pretty similar to Tamago midrange. You can just mostly adapt that. Otherwise, you could probably go to Dexys.com, or sorry, Dexys.app individually. You can go up to Dex, and then you can search by name or search by card here. So you could like search something like, I don't know, something else here, Paraluke, right? Is on here, and then you can find the Life Burst podcast name on here. Click on that, and it'll take you to the deck that I built for it. I don't always upkeep this, so you might see something that's a little late, but it should be pretty new when this video is coming out, just because I wanted to do new stuff for Wixoss, which I think is a really great website. It's still got a little bit of bugs, like for example, to switch from page 1 to page 2 here. I got to click here first. And then sneak my way into it. But anyways, so that's what we're gonna go over into. Let's go ahead and talk about some stuff here. So, Umir Death and Taxes. I'm doing these in no particular order. Again, B tier and above. Umir Death and Taxes, we've swapped to being a 3-color deck now. This is mostly to gain access to peeping. It's still your Death and Taxes type of deck where you're going to really try to run the resources low, and you're really trying to not necessarily vanish things. You're trying to refresh damage, or straight up attack damage is fine too, but that'll give them an enter. And you're trying to trash things. We used to do that a little bit more with Madoka Break, but and we still could do Madoka Break taking out Wing Slash and swapping it over to Peeping Future to like maybe Summer Lives Blues, and I think that's still a very valid strategy for a Death and Taxes deck. But we swapped it over to Yuka Yuka, and mainly for this one, which allows us to reuse Yuka Yuka over and over again. But it's a late game thing. And because it's late game, we're really piecemealing out how much damage we can prevent. We're much softer to aggro, and I think Madoka or the Machina can be swapped to maybe Machina Binds to cover for that. And that's something I'm still leaned towards. But right now, you'll notice that there's basically, this is an attack phase way to stop 1 damage. This is an attack phase way to stop 1 damage. And then this is an attack phase way to stop 1 damage. So we're still somewhat defensive here. I think this is probably better off as binds, but I like the toolboxing of Smash, so I'm going to try it out for a little bit. But generally speaking, this is still going to be really a very much like Death and Taxes type of deck. The first thing to note is that we added Cilia here in order to give ourselves 6 level 1 discard outlets, plus the random drains. And then the other big change that we did from the deck prior is we've added more ways to draw cards with Thrilling. With the black, we've added a 1 of Phalaris in order to do some mill. And the last thing that we've done is we've added a lot of this Yukimi here to basically take the place of Chandelier. Now, it's got a better life burst than Chandelier, arguably a better life burst than Chandelier. Chandelier can recur guards. This can stop an upped Signy, and there's more up Signies than there used to be back in the day. But it puts it into the trash. So it ends up being better because this is a trash denial Signy with a trash denial life burst. If you guys remember what I used to say about freeze, I wanted freeze Signy with freeze life bursts. And this is sort of an extension of that. This has the ability to, if the thing in front of it would be vanished during the attack phase, it gets put into the trash instead. So it's basically like Chandelier. But the upside of that is you can actually pair it with Modem, which says at the beginning of your attack phase, remove a spell from your trash, or remove up to 2 spells from your trash, and give something negative 3,000 for each spell removed this way. That means you can actually pair this with this in order to do double duty, and you'll kill the thing that's in front of this. It'll go to the trash, and then using Umir's ability to switch lanes, you'll put this in a second lane, and then it will vanish the Signy that's in front of it when it attacks. So you're basically doing double duty with this. The last thing that I've added in here is Toby J. It's just bottoming something, and I think that might be better than Focalors, but it's still up for debate. I need to test this more. It could be that this is better as just the Focalor. The last one is Bernice's. I needed to make a black count, and I think if I ended up with binds, I probably would lower my black count from 5 to like 4 or 3, so maybe one of these or 2 of these would get cut. It mills the opponent, and I like its life burst a lot. That's really the main reasons it's in the deck. Not outside of that. It could be Dehumidifier too. Dehumidifier has basically the same life burst, but also has it's a 7,000 power Signy when there's a spell in the trash, and it's very easy to get a spell in the trash for this deck. So this is where I stand and using what Tiffany's telling me. We've got to tune it more for Death and Taxes. Stayed a little bit longer on this deck than the rest of them, just because I wanted to talk about the bigger changes that are sort of happening. Moving on into some of these other options here. I've got the... let's talk about Aya. So we did Aya in the last video. You can learn more about it if you want to see a more in-depth Aya deck tech. But this is just a really general tempo deck. It does a lot of the same thing that the Umir deck does as well, but it more heavily focuses on discard, I think, than the Umir deck does. Musica midrange, or sorry, Musica aggro, which has got the Cosmos deck into it. This is shifted from basically Lion being the main person. It's mainly Musica now because there's more black cards in this than there used to be. For example, we've got the Bernice's, which is a really, really, really good life burst, really, really good effect. And it's also like Cosmos Signies generally mill themselves pretty easily. So it ends up being a perfect add-on for this. Plus, we've got another Cosmos card that we're adding in, Microscopium, which is put the top card of your deck into the trash, and then if it was a level 1, which it always will be because Paradise Universe turns every Cosmos deck that is every Cosmos that's level 2 and above into a level 1 Cosmos, basically. If you run into this, you'll always hit it off. It's basically just a Lancelot, right? Speaking of Lancelot, you've got better Hera, really, is here. And then we also added a new card into this, Ditropia, which is a reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, then put them on the bottom. If all of the cards revealed were level 1, target one of the Signy on your opponent's field with power 3,000 or lower and vanish it. It's free, right? That's awesome. Woohoo! Free. My voice is still killing me. I can't do the woohoos anymore. Outside of this, basically everything vanishes, right? Vanishes. Actually, this one doesn't vanish. It could vanish. But really it's there for Enter Charge, because the deck needs a little bit more Enter Charge. Outside of that, you're just using good level 1s that are still really good in the deck. But like I said, you're using the Musica here, the main Musica, to bounce back your level 2 Hanyo, which gives Double Crush. There's a million ways to open up lanes in this deck. There's less ways to draw cards and less ways to enter charge, so this card becomes better anyways. But because you can open up lanes, Double Crush becomes more attractive, and 2 Double Crushes are better than 1 Double Crush, and Double Crush in the Elrig deck is better than Double Crush in the main deck. So it's actually a much, much, much more solid aggro deck with these changes that are happening in it. Swapping back into here. Let's go back to decks. Let's see what else we've got. So Miko Miko Adams is also a level C tier deck that I'm going to talk about real quick. The main change for Miko Miko coming from basically nothing and suddenly being tiered is got everything to do with Mel Invisible. It gives you a different ability that you can use Mel Burst, which will allow you to vanish a Signy on the opponent's field. And the cool thing with that means that you've got a level 1 that vanishes and also a level 2 that vanishes. Sorry, another level 1 that vanishes. Meaning that this deck can actually be a little bit more aggressive than the other Atomic deck a little earlier. And Mel Invisible allows you to shift into green, which you couldn't do before, really. You couldn't really do any 3-stops in this Adams deck, really, before, because you didn't really have enough white to go off of it, and you needed the blue, so you really couldn't cut anything. But luckily, this multicolored blue and green is an Atom, so you can do less Atoms overall, which I think is better, just in general, for Atom decks. But you can end up being a little bit more of an attacking mid-range deck. You'll see that we ran Nettle type Swai, but another thing you could put in here is Chirin as a way to get some more Enter. But generally speaking, this is just basically the core of the mid-range Atomic structure that you would normally play. Outside of that, let's see, Tama aggro deck has not had very much changes to it at all. The only changes that I've done is I've gone less into Miracle Draw, because it's really not needed. You draw a lot of deck cards in this deck naturally, just through white having sheer number of stuff to do. And having the Toto Risa, which the deck really, really, really needs Enter. So much so that I've even thought about swapping out MC Line Dig and MC Line Disrespect for, like, putting in Mel in here and still maintaining its sort of mono white aggro appeal. It still runs White Heaven. This Xenocluster is more for Enter protection than it is for cards. If you're not worried about getting Enter burned out, you can swap that over to probably Burning Curiosity. The rest of the main deck plays exactly like how a mono white mid-range core should look like. This card has been added in here just because I think that it needs a little bit more late game ability. And the picture frame pairs really, really nicely because it can untap itself. It ups itself when you have your what do you call it, attack, your Tama attack. So it pairs really nicely with Tama's once a game ability. So that's the only changes with the mono white deck for Tama. It's really not that changed other than that. The Tama mid-range deck has changed quite a bit though. You'll see that I ended up going red, and I ended up going red just simply because I needed something to splash in here to do a little bit more early damage, and that was Lancelot. Just makes life a lot easier to do something like that. But I am mostly white and green. Again, the 3-stop in green allows this to happen. Green is finally going to see more play just in general, just because it's easier. You have options to splash now. And Energy Door is also a really, really, really good card. So if you're not pushing Miasma Labyrinth, Energy Door is probably the one that you want to look into using. Outside of that, it uses the normal combo stuff that we were seeing with Komai and Tama once per game anyways, where you would basically, with Tama's once per game with Komai and with Picture Frame, you can attack up to 3 times. You can attack, I think, up to 1 time with a Signy on your field, and up to 3 times with your Elrig, which basically mimics the power of Endless Punchline. And so it ends up being very, very strong. This is the whole deck in of itself. I actually think it's going to be quite a fearsome deck to run against. And then while we're talking about Tama, we can talk about more Tamas later. There is also Team Lion. So I swapped up Team Lion a bit. The first thing that I did for Team Lion is I swapped out DJ Lovett for a different DJ Lovett. I'm using the DJ Lovett mix now. It's just simply because DJ Love It Hangout, I think is what it's called, or something like that. Or Feedback, I can't remember. It costs 2 and has attack phase timing and it opens a lane. It's just kind of outpriced now in terms of other L rigs that you could be using. So instead, I wanted to push the power a little bit more. So DJ Love It Mix worsens your defense because you have really only one way to defend yourself at level 2 now, but it pushes your attack. And that's something that Lion needs currently, is because its aggro is sort of lacking a little bit in terms of other aggro now, mono white aggro and mono red aggro to be specific. So this gets used as a way to really push the damage output. However, it costs 3 enter, so that we needed to lower the enter costs in the main deck as well now. So we added Straightforward Honesty as a way to actually defend ourselves a little bit more for damage. This is one of the rare cases where you're going to probably use this Exceed on the attack phase to vanish a target level 1 Signy to save yourself damage. Now, granted, you're showing off what you're planning on doing here with this Straightforward Honesty, but it will protect you in the early game. That's the hope. Otherwise, it mimics Burning Curiosity, which this deck was using anyways. So I think it's a slightly better version of it. However, if you use it, you can't use Eternal Influence or the other draw spell as much, and so you've got to balance that. So maybe it's still better to use Burning Curiosity here. Or even Innocent One. I don't know. Innocent One doesn't seem like a great choice. Outside of that, we're using the same core that we normally were by making things so we can filter our hands down to make Endless Punchline happen more often. The tech that we're adding is Get Remember now, because we are still running 4 Remembers. So Get Remember does the job of Miracle Jaw, basically, in this deck for 1 enter. Again, we had to lower that enter cost a little bit, which is why we don't have 4 good digs. We only have 1. Even this one of, I'm not too sold on. But I just needed the white enter. But we have basically free ways or cheap ways to sort through our deck outside of that, this being another good one that we just picked up for this deck. So it still ends up being a pretty strong deck to use, but that's the change that I've made. I pushed a little bit more of the aggro just because DJ Love It line needs a little bit more push now, and it can't really rest on its laurels anymore. Madoka midrange has changed completely. It used to be a more, what do you call it? Used to be a more tempo deck that was white, blue. We took the second white out and added the Machina line in here. Sorry, the Machina line. Mostly so we could play things like Miasma Labyrinth, just because we wanted to be a bit more mid-range. You'll see that the deck isn't completely focused on early discard, though it does have more early discard than it used to. You'll see the Monomins in here as well as the Cilias. And we're also running more stuff like Exia to sort of help us get to the later game. Outside of this, I still think this deck is very, very strong. We're still running the 4 Firefly Squids. But I think at this point we don't want to run Notre Dames. We want to run ZRs, because we just need to push more damage output than we used to do in the Madoka deck. So that's the change for Madoka. It's basically just gone a hair slower, turned from a tempo deck to a more mid-range deck. Let's see if I can get this to the second page. Haha! I know the trick. That should be fixed. I actually just hit up Hellfire later about fixing that. And that's one of the things I like about Dexus, is that Hellfire's always here to get feedback and start updating stuff, so this is just a constantly upgrading, better version of things. You'll see I have an Atomic Deus deck that I made. I actually think you could play an Atomic Deus deck list. Just show it off here real quick. I'm not going to go into details about it. I figured out a way to make it work. I think it's fun. I think it's less good than the other Bang deck, but, you know, if you wanted to play an Atomic version of it, it's there. Let's talk about my favorite deck currently, which is the Bang midrange deck. So this has had a ton of updates. I was waiting for this set to come out. So Bang becomes even stronger, in my opinion, with this. We give up the Machina line, and we're okay with that, because it just means that we can't... Sometimes we used to switch out Madoka Clap for dub. We can't do that anymore. We need Madoka Clap now to aim us for a defense, but we're maximizing our offenses. We're maximizing our defenses with Nanashi. Nanashi Scattering gives us the ability to open up a lane, the same amount that Makino used to, but if we are going to be very point blank about the things that we can do, right? Nanashi can do basically three of these, any amount, through the course of a game, your choice, right? It can add a target Signy back to your hand, it can open a lane, or it can enter charge. Very rarely you'll use the enter charge ability, maybe if you need to activate a Parajulius right away. Be a little weird why you would use the Parajulius when you also have the lane opening ability, but you could do it if you wanted to enter screw your opponent or something. Or if you wanted to get more in your trash to mill, there's reasons for it, is what I'm trying to say. But generally speaking, you're going to be using the open a lane or get a thing back to your hand. Now, with Machina, we would get something back and open a lane, and then the next version would get something back and open a lane. So we'd get the total of getting two things back and opening two lanes. This we do the same amount, right? We open a lane here, we open a lane here, but we also have the choice to bring something back to our hand and bring something back to our hand. So inevitably, it just gives you more flexibility than the Machina line, or sorry, Machina line does. You can choose when it's appropriate for you to open up those lanes, and you could also choose like when it's appropriate for you to get the Signy that you need back. And that is a little better. It's also freer, right? Technically, it costs the same amount. To enter to do the Machina line, and then to enter to do the Nanashi line. You do this to enter charge, and then you also do this to put a virus out. So it is comparable. I think it's better just because I want the flexibility a little more in my mid-range list. We also added Energy Door. Energy Door is just better for this type of deck anyways, just because of the opponent. It goes with this attrition-y way that green-black likes to be, where they just sort of ignore what the opponent's doing. The opponent wants to enter burn you. Okay, cool, you can use the enter charge ability. Same thing with the Nanashi, you can use the enter charge ability. Okay, the opponent's trying to discard cards from your hand. Okay, you don't really care. You basically get to guard for free next turn. It does not matter about discard. But you can also bring two Signy back to your hand and keep going with it. And then you get to open up your lane. That's basically everything I'm looking for. But I lose the mill thing that I had in the last Bang deck, so I make up for it a little bit here. We're still running two Phalaruses. Two Phalaruses is still the right number to run in any deck that you're looking to recur this and have this always on turn 2, or sorry, on turn 3 or turn 4. But we added the 4 Bernices. Now, the Bernices, I'm gonna go ahead and just straight up say I like this card, and so I want to use it. And a lot of this deck is a lot of things that I found. It's just a lot of jank jank is the wrong word. It's a lot of good stuff that I've mushed together and found useful, right? And made things work when they don't seem like they should work. I think this is also in that same line. I also do need a little bit more push in terms of the mill now. I also lowered one Tama out of there, so I do need a little bit more mill push. So I think this is a good way to get about doing it. I also really like the life burst on this. Not necessarily because it does anything on the opponent's turn, though arguably, I don't know, bringing back a Chiron to get myself something would be nice, and also this is an enter ability, so it does some things, right? It also can bring back Hakats. So there's things to bring back with it. But no Lancelots, no Ramels that I like to bring back usually with this type of ability. The other thing I did was I did swap from 4 Akufukus to this Nettle type Zwei. It really, very simple reason, it's a Venom. Yeah, that's main reason. I can open up lanes, which is nice. I want to open up more lanes. I think I wanted that anyways last time I was playing the deck against a lot of these more controlling decks. So I like that, but we are running this sort of small Venom package in the deck now, where this can give Venom 10,000 power, and pumping this to 20k can be huge in some scenarios, especially when we deal a lot with Lancer. But this is great because this card, Eins, allows us to do something that we wanted to do last time, which has this life burst at level 1 and also be green, but also be a relevant card to use. And sometimes I have more cards in my hands than I care and I'll have to discard down. So at that point, this card actually just becomes a spell, and is able to pump something over a certain threshold and let myself get damage in. One of the things that I always have trouble with is a lot of the times I'm struggling with because I have two amino acids out, or amino acid and Asagetsune, and I can't get my level 1 or something quite above the 12,000 marker that it needs to be, and this can actually do that for you, and that's a big change for this deck. The last big change that we're doing is we're also using Patra type Dre. We never really use its first enter ability, but late in the game I would be interested in using it if I have enter to burn. We're using its second enter ability more than anything to bring a green Signy back from the trash. It's probably going to be an Osagetsune, a Chirin, a Parajulius, or an amino acid most of the times, but sometimes it'll be your Eins, and when it's your Eins, you'll use it basically as this being, I'm going to now sacrifice the Eins, give it plus 10,000, and then I'm going to go ahead and use my action once per turn, give this negative 10,000, and give something else negative 10,000. We needed a little bit more ways to deal with stuff during the main phase rather than just the attack phase, and so that helps out quite a bit getting us there. We can combo it up with the Anna Mirage if we ever need to, or something like that, in order to get negative 20,000 and get things down that are 12,000 or higher. That's Bang. I'm really excited to play it a bit more. We also have Atomic Deus. Atomic Deus has changed in the fact that we're adding more white into the deck, right? And we're going less ham on the atoms. So generally speaking, in order for Atomic Deus to function, you want around 16 atoms. That's the number you're looking to hit. And that's good because the deck needed more flexibility spots open. Garden of Singularity beforehand was actually pretty bad in the deck, and the more and more I played it, the more and more I wished it was something else. But as soon as I swapped over to Yuka, and this is the Yuka that is draws you basically 2 cards. This one also draws you 2 cards, but lets you put out 3 Signy that are level 3, 3, and 3, which is crazy, by the way. You haven't lived until you've gone H2O, H2O, Exia, or something like that, and then the opponent's just looking at it and being like, I don't know what to do here. But Garden of Singularity actually really hums now that we are just, like, we have the ability to draw here. If we don't use Xenocluster, if we use Xenocluster, we still are drawing 3, drawing 2, drawing 2, and then drawing 2 as well here. So it ends up being that you actually have a fair amount of draw power in this deck. And you also get draw power, let's not forget, from the some of the main deck too. You also get draw power from the Life Burst on your GA. You get draw power from some of these Life Bursts that give you an alternate thing to draw cards. You get Life Burst, or you get stuff from the Life Burst on H2O, but you also draw cards off the H2O. If you don't want to make the opponent discard, you draw cards off the H2. You draw cards off the one of Bruno in here. And Steampunk arguably is card draw, even though it goes to the field, just because it means that you can hold a card in your hand that you would normally have to commit to the field. Otherwise, the deck has stayed basically the same. Yuka is a pretty good thing to put out on, sort of like with Anna Mirage's Life Burst, and the 2 of Exias mean that with your trash recursion that you have in this deck, you will be able to play out a couple Exias, maybe a couple times, more than once anyways. So that's the direction that I'm going with the Atomic deck, and it is really humming. I think it's a lot more powerful than the original version of it. I wish during the ceremony, if I knew that I should have been running the Yuka, I probably would have. But let's see what else we have. So Hirana, Team Aggro, it's still hanging out in the bottom of B tier, so it still exists. Nothing's really changed with this deck. We've put a little bit more emphasis on Enter Burn, put a little bit more emphasis on having Yuki in the main deck, just because Yuki's just a generally... It's weird, Yuki's really good to pair with red aggro. Shutting something down and then killing it with your red aggro cards is genuinely a very, very good choice to do. But yeah, the deck is just mostly just like we retooled it a little bit to more focus on Enter Burn, a little less on Remember. And you'll see the new card that we've put in here. This is basically just that other level 1 that that enter burns your opponent. Um, I can't remember its name. Begins with an I. Um, uh, that card you'd use as a 2 of in basically every aggro deck. This is just the same. It's just the same thing, except instead of having to spend enter, you discard a card from your hand, and arguably that's theoretically better. You know, costs less in the grand scheme of things for a red deck to do that. Um, Especially because you want to run Go to the Top, and Go to the Top is a little expensive in this deck. So balancing it out with a cheaper way to do things, more freer way to do things, more free ways to enter burn is really the right way to go. Again, I gotta apologize for my voice. I got the flu, and it did not. My voice left, like it just like exited the room. And it's been like 2 weeks, and it still doesn't necessarily want to come back. But I'm pushing through it for you guys because I know you guys want these lists and be able to start jamming some stuff. And I think this is all good springboards. I don't know if any of these lists are the bee's knees. I do test them, you know, so they are pretty good in a meta, and you can take any of these, I think, and probably win your games of Wixoss. But you could practice and tool things to your own meta. So X has changed in the way that I am pushing more of a recursion element to it to just basically be redundant and also be more immune to opponents' effects more than anything else, right? So, for example, when you look at this, you'll see the Terra Beast package has now been added on. We've got thoroughbreds in here. We've got buffaloes. We've got the tengus. We've got ways to get ourselves out of discard. We've got ways to get ourselves with damage push with Nobunaga. Maybe there should be 2 Nobunagas in this deck. I actually think I'd prefer having 2, but you find the slots to do it, guys. The Tamas also ignore life bursts, so there's a lot of ways that you're going to be pushing sort of this damage output. Oh, okay, this is not X. Excuse me. This is Deus. That's why there's less Nobunagas. Derp. The X deck and the Deus deck are basically very similar. The only difference is using Machina Bind here, and we're using clearly the X assist line. But basically, it's almost the same deck otherwise. You put a little bit more black in it, and you want a little bit more trash recursion stuff. But outside of that, your X deck and your what do you call it? And your Deus aggro deck are basically the same. They're the same deck. So let me go over to the X deck now. You guys probably were just screaming that at me and I wasn't listening. So clearly we're running Machina Smash here, and we're doing the Deus Shield instead as a way to prevent damage for this. But otherwise, the L rig is exactly the same. X gives you access to being able to do Assassin. We focus a little bit more on red aggro here, a little less on the black recursion cards. We still added the Terra Beast package. Otherwise, pretty much everything's the same. Got 2 buffaloes instead of 1 buffalo. I like Baphomet. Baphomet turns on your Machina Wing Slash right away, which I think I prefer. Otherwise, this deck is basically just the red version of the Deus deck that I just described otherwise. Let's see what else we gotta go. Tamago discard. All right. So Tamago discard is basically stayed the same in the Elrig deck. Nothing has changed whatsoever. Only a couple things have changed in the main deck, which is a few more ZRs just to push a little bit more damage. And then outside of that, we added a couple Bernices. That's it. That is it. It is basically the same deck otherwise. You're still trying to discard the opponent at various times. I think I added a Trouble just to get some more cards in hand. I also like the Life Burst. It paired nicely with just trying to fill out Focalor's spots. Bernices have a really, really good Life Burst here because getting a Neon Tetra out, getting something that's already frozen, and getting a Bradamante ability on it is really nice. Hakots are really good things to bring out and be able to use with that ability. And sometimes even you might even be able to pull off the Typhon, which would be crazy. Typhon getting and then just immediately exceeding it, so you have a 15k that the opponent needs to deal with. It's pretty cool. Otherwise, it's basically the same deck. It's still a control deck, still discardy. Tama discard midrange. I think this is a slightly better path if you wanted to go down discarding aspect of things. So this is basically just Tama, right? Tama's your white damage output, but you're using the blue-black support in the main deck. And you're pairing it with a little bit of some white signies that are kind of annoying to deal with. So, for example, you might have used Thrilling before. Well, now you're using Miracle Draw. Monomins are in this deck. You're also pairing it again with that 6. I just like the idea of 6. It makes the damage, or it makes the draws more correct very early on for you to automatically start trying to put out some discard for the opponent. Gabe Log is a really good card. It's secretly a white blue card that you want to be playing if you're discarding your opponents. Basically, if they're do some draw power and fill out lanes, this basically is an extra discard and gets rid of something on the field. But otherwise, it's playing a lot like the mid-range decks that you normally would face that are a blue-black discard deck. It's using every single one of those normal things, but it's plugging in some extra white annoying signy like Exia, Remember, Haniels, Yukis, these types of Gaylogs. And it is a little color greedy. That is its weakness, though. So that's going to bring us to the next deck that we're actually going to talk about, which is Yuzuki. So Yuzuki is actually naturally preys on those types of decks pretty well. I've seen people use Tama instead of Umir, and also use Akino instead of Umir. I like Umir for a very specific reason. Currently, it's okay, but when the assist line for Earth comes out, I would swap Earth's assist line over the Machina's assist line. And then what you end up having is the ability to Umir clear, which can make the opponent, who probably has 4 or 5 cards in their hand, because that's the decks that you're preying on, drop those 4 or 5, and they end up they have to discard it, so they probably lose guards that they've shifted, right, with Super Celestia Saber. But the other thing that they do is it also forces them to mill themselves basically by 4, and when you have Earth, which is going to mill 8, together that's 12, and that is enough to basically say that I'm always guaranteeing a refresh as an aggro deck. And I like that because I believe when you're in hyper aggro, my opinion is you should be running some kind of blue assist that helps you get a lot of cards in your hand. And the cool thing with clear is, while it doesn't let you get a lot of cards, it basically just gives you 1 extra card. It gives you a whole new hand, which is useful when you end up drawing a hand and you're like, I have 2 Nobunagas in hand and a spell. This is not going to work for me. I need a mulligan, right? And so you Umir mulligan. I really like it a lot here. It freezes an Elrig too. Aggro decks really struggle having guards in hand, so this is a way to basically quote-unquote guard from the opponent. But generally speaking, that's not your main focus. You're an aggro deck. You'd be running Go to the Top just like any Enter Burn deck is doing. Entwined Supremacy to push extra damage. That's your Glory Grow. Outside of that, you do have Phalaris because you have some amount of card recursion between Smash and also a lot of draw between Clear. That's a good out sometimes to have that. But outside of that, you're using the normal red aggro stuff that you normally would. Kintokis, you've got the Nobunagas. I've even fit in the Terra Beast package a little bit here. No Buffaloes, because that's just not what the deck wants to do. It doesn't have enough recursion to really fit a Buffalo, but it has enough to fit Thoroughbreds and then bring back Tengus, and Madoka Collapse is the main things that you need to worry about right now. So you're just doing that to basically work with an open lane and get yourself the ability to attack through the open lane. Other than that, you're pretty much focused on Enter Burning. Tom is there as well, just to help you maintain a little bit of blacks that you're looking to hit. And the Fornax is, just like I said, the new level 1 Enter Burn that you can be using that doesn't cost Enter, also costs life per slot, which is kind of nice because the deck is lacking a little bit of quality life bursts. So X-Aggro we talked about, Bang Midrange we talked about, Top of Deus we talked about. So we've gone over all the D-tiered deck lists. I think this set has given a lot to play with, but mostly in the pieces and the assist lines. And that's why you're going to see that's being the major shifts basically in all the decks. Very few main deck inclusions outside of the Terra Beast package and discard decks getting another level 1 to really hammer that discount card down early. Outside of that, nothing really has impacted these decks to overtly start becoming like a powerhouse. Yeah, just assist lines. Like that's the reason why Miko Miko suddenly exists now where it didn't used to exist. I hope you guys liked this. Me going over all of the updates to the deck lists. I know it's a little wordy sometimes. Tell me what you guys are most excited for. And if you guys, again, want to watch the tier list to learn more about like why certain decks are above other decks, you can watch that video, and I'll see you on the next one.